Hello there, and a good evening to you. This is Talk, and it is Petrie. And coming up, we're going to be talking about the weather. We Brits love nothing more, do we? But this time, the weather, it's pretty bad. So we'll be talking about that risk to life weather report. Plus, Cody Darler will be here to go through the papers at the top of the hour. But now, Donald Trump is being pressed for answers by US lawmakers about the military strikes on suspected, unproven Venezuelan drug boats. A report has alleged that a follow-up strike was ordered to kill those who survived the initial attack. It's known as a double tap, and it is illegal. It is not just American illegal, it's internationally illegal. It's a war crime. And it could actually mean that the person who pressed the button could be done for murder. They would not be protected if it is a war crime or it was against all other laws, but from saying, I was just following orders. A Republican-led committee overseeing the Pentagon vowed to conduct vigorous oversight into strikes. A US strike on a boat in September 2nd left 2 survivors, and the second attack that I was just talking about, so 2 people were seen to be clinging to wreckage. Apparently, allegedly, the second attack was carried out to comply with the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's orders to kill everybody. We're here to discuss this is, I'm delighted to say, Jamil Jaffer, who is Executive Director at the National Security Institute of the George and Mason Universities, Antonin Scalia Law School in Washington, D.C. Jamil, lovely to see you again.
Good to be here.
Really good to see you. Okay, so apparently right now the president is having meetings about Venezuela and what is going on there. But there are a lot of questions being asked now after that Washington Post article came out saying that they had somebody inside, somebody who whistle blew and said, this is what actually happened. Where do you stand on that?
Well, look, we don't know all the facts yet, so we need to find out exactly what happened. There seems to be a dispute. The president said today that if he wanted the first strike, but he would not have wanted a second strike, and that what he heard from Pete, the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, was that there either wasn't a second strike or that there was a misunderstanding. So they're clarifying that. We'll need to hear the facts, but let's assume the facts are as we understand them to be, which is Secretary Hegseth directed that the attack be undertaken. Unclear whether he said kill everybody or what the orders were. It then goes to the commander of JSOC, the Joint Special Operations Command, or it might have been U.S. Special Operations Command, who directs the Admiral Bradley, who directs the operation. And so the question is now, who gave the order to take the second strike? Was it because the order that Hegseth gave? Was the order that Bradley gave? Was it somebody else in the field? And if so, where are those people still in the fight? Those 2 people who were allegedly in the water. And it's hard to imagine somebody in a water, on a boat who's been shot up, being able to fight back. And if they can't fight back, then you're generally supposed to leave them alone under the generally accepted understanding of the laws of war. And now the challenge, Petrie, is that that's part of it's codified in a part of the Geneva Conventions, Additional Protocol 1, that the U.S. doesn't subscribe to in full. We never signed it. We never agreed to it. That being said, a lot of the provisions of Additional Protocol 1 are viewed as part of the law of war as understood by the U.S., and they're part of the U.S. law of war manual. And in fact, this question of if you're shipwrecked, you're wounded, you're out of the fight, essentially, you can't be killed. That is part of the U.S. law of war manual. So it may be that this was an unlawful order. It may be somebody misunderstood the order. It was not operationalized correctly.
But like you said, Jamil, that this was all of these changes to the law of war, if you like, were brought about after the Japanese slaughtered American servicemen in the water, shot them dead after they were scuppered, so that they had nowhere else to go. They were not a threat, and it's also to stop enemy combatants who are injured from just being shot for no reason. If they are not a threat, they are not to be killed. Otherwise, that is murder. It is not part of war. But it is already, if we go back a step, is this even a war? I mean, this is again. There's been no congressional oversight. There's been no congressional acceptance of saying that these narco drug people are akin to terrorists. They're not ISIS. They're not a combined ideological force who are mounting attacks on America in the conventional way. The fact that this is even being described as that is already being questioned by everybody around the globe, including the UK.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, there's a few things going on here, right? Number one, as a general matter, presidents since George Washington have asserted the right to act as commander-in-chief of the armed forces and to use the executive power to conduct military actions without authorization from Congress to address imminent threats against the United States. Now, the president of the United States has said, look, I think these narco-terrorists are an imminent threat to the United States. I didn't previously, we previously treated them as law enforcement issues, which we've done with other kinds of terrorists. I'm changing that up. I'm going to treat this as a national security threat. 10,000 plus Americans have been killed by fentanyl, by other drugs. This is my position. Now, Congress has a chance to weigh in on this, right? They have the War Powers Resolution, which requires the president to withdraw forces if he doesn't get authority within 60 days. Congress has never enforced that law, but they could. They could also withdraw the funding. They haven't done that. So the question becomes, when the president asserts his or her authority as commander-in-chief, if Congress isn't going to do anything about it, well, then what happens? As a general matter, when this has happened over and over again, it's happened with nearly every president that the U.S. has seen since George Washington, the president is able to take that action. We've gone into Panama. We've gone into Grenada. We've gone into numerous wars without congressional authorization. We certainly haven't had a declaration of war since 1945. So the question becomes, if Congress isn't going to do anything about it, who's going to stop the president?
But, you know, the president will talk about the fact that, you know, fentanyl, blah, blah, blah. Venezuela isn't a huge exporter of fentanyl. It is of cocaine. Mexico is the biggest exporter of fentanyl. A lot of this isn't adding up, Jamil. If you say you're going to go after narco-terrorists and then you pardon one, just last week, and his explanation for that pardon was, well, you know, they told me he was good, and you can't really blame the president of a country for being a narco-terrorist. It's exactly what he's doing to Maduro. So none of this is adding up. That if you're going to go after fentanyl exporters, you do that with Mexico. You don't do that with Venezuela. Is anybody buying this?
Well, look, I mean, the president's asserted a rationale. Whether we buy it or not is a different question, right? But we can talk about that, right? Look, the reality is that the fentanyl problem isn't even Mexico. It's coming through Mexico. It's really China. And so if we're going to go after anybody, we should go after the Chinese for fentanyl. That's number one. Number two, there is still a cocaine problem coming from Venezuela. It's a serious problem. We've taken out the leader of Panama in the past. We invaded Panama to take out their leader to bring him to face charges in the United States for being a drug kingpin. So we've done this operation before. By the way, that was without congressional authority.
Before pardoning him.
Well, I mean, longer conversation, right? Honduras, obviously a different story, right? That obviously is unclear. Why would you conduct a war on terrorism, or sorry, a war on drugs, go after Mexico for letting fentanyl through, go after China, go after all these other folks, and then actually pardon a convicted drug dealer who went to go to jail for 45 years for creating a cocaine highway? That does seem completely inconsistent. You know, hard to explain, but at the end of the day, the president's asserted a rationale here. If Congress wants to stop him, by the way, they have plenty of tools to do that. They're choosing not to. That's the challenge here. And if the president wants to act and he acts and nobody stops him, it's kind of like a tree falling in the forest. It's an interesting question. Yeah. Doesn't really matter much.
Can Congress force the Pentagon to release the full video of that exchange, or not even exchange, the first bombing of that boat, missile of that boat, and then the alleged second? Can they force the Pentagon to release that, or will the Pentagon say, no, it's top secret? I mean, they won't get away with that.
Yeah, members of Congress have security clearances by default, by their position, right? They have top secret, sensitive, compartmented information clearances, so they can access it. It can be brought to the House Intelligence Committee or the Senate Intelligence Committee. Members of Congress can go down to the secure compartmented information facility to view the videos. But of course, like with anything, it's a compromise. The president's going to assert these are national security protected materials. The Bush administration did that. The Obama administration did that. The Biden administration did that. So the Trump administration is likely to assert national security and say, we're not going to give you the tapes. but it becomes a negotiation. Do you want to get bills through? Do you want to get people confirmed, right? And if Republicans can hold the line, they'll eventually get those tapes. They'll be able to view them and make a decision for themselves. They're already conducting oversight hearings. We'll see how that goes. And of course, in the course of those hearings, they can also subpoena members of the executive branch and the like and try to enforce those subpoenas. The problem, of course, is the place you go for enforcement of subpoenas is the U.S. Attorney in D.C. appointed by the President of the United States.
The thing is that, I mean, this administration, this Defense Secretary, War Secretary, whatever he's calling himself now, cannot say we're not going to show you the tape. They've already released the first bit of the tape, right? The bit that they wanted people to see. The hoorah! Look at us, we're strong. They've a blow by blow account of the stuff in Iran and Yemen and other places. This is the most talky defence organisation that we've ever seen, and they've put out videos. How can they now say, oh, because of national security we can't release that last 7 seconds of that tape? Because then that speaks to what was on that last 7 seconds of that tape, right?
Well, it certainly does. And I mean, that's the question. That's exactly the pressure they're going to face. They faced pressure on the Epstein files. They finally collapsed on that. The Bush administration faced pressure on this, on the enhanced interrogation program, on the surveillance programs. Those eventually came to an accommodation as well. So I think what you're likely to see here is some sort of an accommodation. You probably are likely to see the release. And if the video is, as people say, that there are 2 men in the water holding on for dear life and a strike takes them out, I mean, that's going to be very hard to defend. There's going to be a lot of pressure on somebody to take the fall. And then the question becomes, do they put this on Admiral Bradley? Do they put this on the Secretary of Defense? Clearly, the president's not going to take responsibility for this. He's going to shift it to somebody. The question is just who's going to take the fall.
Well,
Has been some talk, by the way.
He's already set up his plausible deniability case, hasn't he?
That's right. He has. And so and there's been a lot of talk in the last few weeks about Dan Driscoll, the Secretary of the Army, being out front on some of the Ukraine issues. So the question is, maybe is Dan Driscoll in line to be Secretary of Defense? People have been suggesting that around the water cooler. We'll see what happens. But with the current administration, they have not been afraid to throw career military officers under the bus when they think that they're not doing the right thing. You've seen good military officers fired at the NSA for no apparent reason, except that Laurel Loomer shows up. So we may see that here. If Admiral Bradley goes first, that may be the first thing. But it will be hard if, in fact, the video is, as people say, for Secretary Hedgepeth to survive this, given the other challenge he's facing within the administration.
I mean, when you say go, do you mean prosecuted? Imprisoned for murder?
Hard to know. Certainly, maybe not in office, right? And then from there, prosecuted. If it was a violation of the laws of war, the violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, a violation of the Law of War Manual, certainly a prosecution could be brought. But again, it's at the discretion of the executive branch, the military justice system, and ultimately the commander-in-chief on one hand or the chief law enforcement officer on the other, the president of the United States. He can make that call. He can also pardon people, as we've seen, both at the beginning of his presidency with all the January 6ers and now with the former president of Honduras.
I mean, really, what's the point? You might as well just let him get on with it at the end of the day, if you can stop it all. Jamil, thank you. Always lovely to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Jamil Jaffer, the Executive Director at the National Security Institute at the George Mason University's Antonin Scalia Law School in Washington, D.C. Quick break. Back to talk about the weather next.